Victoria Crane ripped the mop from Marcus Johnson's hands and hurled it across the executive lobby. The wooden handle shattered against the marble pillar. "Get out of my building!" Marcus stood motionless. His 8-year-old daughter Maya pressed against his leg, trembling. "Daddy!" "It's okay, baby." "No." Victoria stepped closer, her voice cutting like surgical steel. "It's not okay. Security is escorting you out. Now." But 72 hours from this moment, Victoria Crane would be on her knees in a dark basement, begging this same janitor to save everything she'd built. Drop your city below. Let's see how far this story reaches. The mop handle hit the marble and exploded into 3 pieces. Marcus didn't flinch. 11 years of night shifts had taught him how to absorb violence without returning it. 4 combat tours before that had taught him something else, how to recognize fear disguised as power. Victoria Crane was terrified. He could see it in the way her hands shook after she threw the mop, in the way her voice pitched higher than she wanted, in the way she kept glancing toward the elevator, expecting someone to witness her breakdown. "I said, get out." "I heard you the first time, Dr. Crane." "Then why are you still standing there?" Marcus looked down at Maya. Her fingers were digging into his work pants, her eyes fixed on the broken mop like it was a wounded animal. "Because my daughter is scared, and I'm not moving until she's ready." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Your daughter shouldn't be in this building at midnight." "My daughter is here because I can't afford childcare that runs past 10. She's here because I work double shifts to keep her in a school where kids don't get shot. She's here because her mother is dead and I'm all she's got." The words landed like punches. Victoria took a half-step back. "That's not my problem." "No, ma'am. Your problem is the mold growing in the ICU ventilation system. Your problem is the 3 patients who developed respiratory complications last month. Your problem is that I've written 4 reports about it, and nobody in this building bothered to read a single one. How dare you?" "I dare because people are going to die. Not might die, will die. And when they do, every lawyer in Chicago will be asking why the janitor saw it coming and the CEO didn't." Victoria's face went white. Behind her, the elevator doors opened. 2 security guards stepped out, hands already moving toward their belts. "Dr. Crane, everything okay?" Victoria didn't look at them. Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus, reading him, measuring him, trying to understand how a man in a blue uniform could make her feel so small. "Escort Mr. Johnson and his daughter off the premises, immediately." "Ma'am, his employment is terminated effective now. I want his badge, his keys, and his access credentials, and I want him gone before anyone else sees him." Marcus felt Maya's grip tighten. He reached down and lifted her into his arms. She buried her face in his neck, her body shaking with silent sobs. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "The only mistake I made was letting maintenance staff think they had opinions worth hearing." Marcus held her gaze for 3 long seconds. Then he turned and walked toward the security guards, his daughter pressed against his chest, the broken pieces of his mop scattered across the floor behind him. He didn't look back. What? The parking garage was cold and empty. Marcus buckled Maya into her car seat, his hands moving on autopilot, while his mind raced through numbers he couldn't afford to calculate. Rent, utilities, Maya's school tuition, health insurance, groceries. 11 years of paychecks gone in 11 seconds. "Daddy." He looked at his daughter. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet, but her voice was steady. She'd learned early that falling apart was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Yeah, baby." "That lady was mean." "Yeah, she was." "Why did she break your mop?" Marcus climbed into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. The leather was cracked and cold. "Because she was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of being wrong, scared of looking weak, scared of the same things everybody's scared of." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you scared, Daddy?" Marcus looked at her in the rearview mirror. 8 years old, smart as a whip, brave in ways that broke his heart. "Yeah," he admitted. I am. What are you scared of? He started the engine. The old truck coughed twice before turning over. I'm scared of letting you down. Gang. The apartment was dark when they got home. Marcus carried Maya inside her arms wrapped around his neck, her breathing slow and steady. She'd fallen asleep in the car the way she always did after something bad happened. He laid her in bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and stood there watching her breathe. 4 years ago, he'd stood in this same spot watching Jasmine breathe. His wife, his best friend. The woman who'd looked at a broke soldier from the South Side and seen something worth loving. She'd gone to a clinic with stomach pain. They'd sent her home with antacids and a pat on the head. 3 days later, she'd died in his arms from a ruptured appendix that any competent doctor would have caught. Marcus had held her hand as she slipped away, had felt the exact moment when her grip went slack and the light left her eyes. Take care of our baby, she'd whispered. Promise me. He'd promised, and every day since he'd kept that promise working double shifts, saving every penny, making sure Maya had everything Jasmine would have wanted her to have. Now he had nothing. No job, no savings, no plan. Just a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. His phone rang at 6 a.m. Marcus had been awake for hours sitting at the kitchen table staring at bills he couldn't pay. He grabbed the phone without checking the caller ID. Yeah. Mr. Johnson, this is Patricia Chen from Human Resources at Prestige Medical. He almost laughed. Calling to make sure I'm really gone. No, calling to warn you. Something in her voice made him sit up straighter. Warn me about what? Dr. Crane filed an incident report last night. She's claiming you threatened her. Aggressive behavior, verbal intimidation, creating a hostile work environment. That's a lie. I know it is. I pulled the security footage this morning. It clearly shows her throwing the mop, not you. But the footage has already been requested by her legal team. What does that mean? It means they're going to bury it, or edit it, or lose it entirely. Marcus's hand tightened around the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because I've worked at this hospital for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone try this hard to destroy someone who was just trying to help. And because... She paused. Because your reports were right. What? The ventilation system. We found mold contamination this morning. 3 more patients developed symptoms overnight. The CDC is involved now. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. How bad? Bad, and getting worse. But nobody's going to admit that a janitor saw it coming when the entire facilities department missed it. That's not how this works. So what happens now? Now they cover it up. They blame the contractors, the weather, the building age, anything except the people who ignored the warnings. And you? She let out a long breath. You disappear. That's what they're counting on. That you'll take your severance and vanish and never tell anyone what you knew. And if I don't disappear, then they'll make sure you wish you had. The line went dead. Marcus sat in the silence of his kitchen, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. Maya came out of her room at 7, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She was wearing her school uniform plaid skirt, white blouse braids that Marcus had learned to do himself after watching 17 YouTube tutorials. Morning, Daddy. Morning, baby girl. She climbed into her chair and looked at the table. No breakfast, no coffee, just bills spread across the surface like a battlefield. Are those the bad papers? Yeah. How bad? Marcus gathered them up, stacking them neatly, hiding them from her view. Nothing I can't handle. You always say that. Because it's always true. She watched him with those 2 smart eyes. Are you going to find a new job? Yes. Today. Starting today. What kind of job? Whatever kind I can get. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her small hand on top of his. Mama used to say you were the strongest man she ever knew. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She said that every night. When she tucked me in, she said, "Your daddy can handle anything. That's why I picked him." He couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Could only sit there with his daughter's hand on his, feeling the weight of a promise he'd made to a dying woman 4 years ago. "I'm going to figure this out," he said finally. "I don't know how yet, but I will." Maya nodded like she'd never doubted it. "I know, Daddy. You always do." Sir. He dropped her at school and spent the morning filling out applications. Grocery store, gas station, warehouse. Anywhere that would hire a man with a military background and a gap in his resume he couldn't explain without sounding crazy. "So you were a janitor at a hospital?" "Yes." "And you left because—" "Creative differences." Nobody called back. At noon his phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Marcus Johnson." "Who's asking?" "My name is Harold Harmon. I'm the chief of medicine at Prestige Medical Center." Marcus pulled his truck to the side of the road. "I don't work there anymore." "I'm aware. That's why I'm calling. If this is about the incident report, it's not. It's about the ventilation system." Marcus went still. "What about it?" "You were right. About everything. The mold, the contamination, the patient complications, all of it. We're looking at a full-blown outbreak if we don't contain it in the next 48 hours. Then contain it." "We can't. Our facilities team doesn't know the building well enough. The original blueprints are incomplete. The secondary systems aren't even in the digital records." "That sounds like a you problem, Doctor." "It is. But it's also a problem for the 11 patients currently fighting for their lives in our ICU, and the 30 more who could be infected by tomorrow." Marcus stared through the windshield at a city that didn't care whether he lived or died. "Why should I help your CEO threw me out like garbage, in front of my daughter?" "Because you're not the kind of man who lets people die to prove a point. I've read your service record, Mr. Johnson. I know what you did in Fallujah. I know about the medal they gave you for carrying 3 wounded Marines out of a burning building." "That was a long time ago." "Was it? Or is it the same thing you've been doing every day since, protecting people who never knew they were in danger?" Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about Jasmine, about Maya, about the promise he'd made and the man he'd sworn to be. "I want my job back." "That's not my decision to make." "Then make it someone's decision. I'm not walking back into that building as a volunteer. I'm not giving Victoria Crane the satisfaction of thinking I came crawling back. If you want my help, you'll find a way." Silence on the line. Then, "I'll see what I can do." "You have 1 hour." Marcus hung up. 47 minutes later, his phone rang. "Mr. Johnson, it's Patricia Chen again." "What now?" Dr. Harmon just walked into Dr. Crane's office and closed the door. I don't know what he said, but she came out looking like she'd seen a ghost. "You've been reinstated, effective immediately." Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "What about the incident report?" "Withdrawn. The security footage has been restored to its original form, and Dr. Crane has been strongly encouraged to issue a formal apology." "I don't want her apology." "I didn't think you would, but you might want to hear what Dr. Harmon told the board." "What did he tell them?" "He said, 'That janitor knows more about keeping people alive than half the doctors in this building, and if we lose one more patient because we were too proud to listen to him, I'll make sure every news outlet in the country knows exactly who's responsible.'" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "When do they need me?" "Now. The situation is deteriorating faster than anyone expected. I'm on my way." The hospital looked different in daylight. Marcus had spent 11 years walking its halls after midnight, when the corridors were empty and the machines hummed their lonely songs. Now it was chaos, nurses rushing past with worried faces, administrators huddled in corners speaking in urgent whispers, security guards positioned at every entrance. Dr. Harmon met him at the front door. "Thank you for coming." Don't thank me yet. Where's Dr. Crane? Command Center, 3rd floor. She's coordinating the response. I need to see her first. That might not be... It's not optional. Dr. Harmon studied him for a moment, then nodded. They took the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, Marcus stepped out first. The command center was a large conference room converted into a war room. Laptops everywhere, phones ringing constantly, people talking over each other in the controlled panic of professionals facing a crisis they weren't prepared for. Victoria Crane stood at the center of it all, her back to the door, her voice sharp and commanding. I don't care what the contractor says. I want that report on my desk in... She turned and saw Marcus. The room went quiet. Marcus walked toward her, stopping 3 feet away. Close enough to see the exhaustion in her eyes. Close enough to see the fear she was trying to hide. Mr. Johnson? Dr. Crane. I understand you've been reinstated. I have. Then I suppose I should... You threw a mop at me in front of my daughter. Victoria flinched. Around them, people suddenly found other things to look at. She cried herself to sleep that night. Asked me why the mean lady wanted to hurt her daddy. I didn't have an answer. I was under a great deal of pressure. We're all under pressure. That doesn't give you the right to treat people like they're less than human. Victoria's face hardened. Are you here to help or to lecture me? I'm here to save your patients. After that, we'll see. He turned to Dr. Harmon. Take me to the ventilation access points, all of them. I need to map the contamination spread before we can contain it. This way. Marcus started toward the door, then stopped, looked back at Victoria. For the record, I don't work for you. I work for the people in those ICU beds who never asked to get sick. I work for the nurses who are terrified they'll bring this home to their kids. I work for everyone in this building who deserves better than what they've been getting. Victoria said nothing. You wanted to know who I am. Marcus held her gaze. I'm the man who's going to clean up your mess. Again. And when this is over, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. He walked out without waiting for a response. Ned. The basement was Marcus's kingdom. He'd spent 11 years learning its secrets, the hidden passages, the forgotten access points, the emergency systems that didn't appear on any modern blueprint. He knew where the pipes ran and where they leaked. He knew which valves stuck and which ones failed without warning. He knew the building's heartbeat better than the engineers who'd designed it. Dr. Harmon followed him through narrow corridors, past hissing pipes and humming generators into the guts of a building that most people never saw. The primary contamination is in the secondary HVAC system, Marcus explained as they walked. Installed in 1987, supposed to be decommissioned when the new system went in, but someone decided it was cheaper to just seal it off and forget about it. So the mold has been growing for years, maybe decades, but it was contained until about 6 months ago. What happened 6 months ago? Marcus stopped at a junction point where 3 corridors met. He pointed to a pipe running along the ceiling. Someone cut costs on routine maintenance, skipped the quarterly inspections, let the seals deteriorate. Eventually, one of them failed, and the old system started leaking into the new one. And no one noticed? I noticed. I wrote 4 reports about it. Nobody read them. Dr. Harmon was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be useful. I need access to the original blueprints, the paper ones from the archives, not the digital copies. I need a team of 4 people who can follow instructions without asking questions. And I need everyone out of the ICU wing for the next 6 hours. 6 hours. We have critical patients who can't be moved. Then they'll be breathing contaminated air while we work. Your choice. Dr. Harmon ran a hand through his hair. I'll make it happen. One more thing. What? Marcus looked at him. When this is over, I want the truth to come out. All of it. The ignored reports, the cost-cutting everything. These patients deserve to know why they got sick. That's not up to me. Then make it up to you. Because if you don't, I'll make it up to someone else. Journalists love stories about hospitals that poison their patients to save money. Dr. Harmon stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "You're not like any janitor I've ever met." "That's because I'm not a janitor," Marcus said. "I'm the man who keeps your building alive, and right now, your building is dying." He turned and walked deeper into the basement, toward the source of the contamination, toward the work that needed to be done. Behind him, Dr. Harmon pulled out his phone and started making calls. The next 6 hours were a blur of sweat coordination and controlled chaos. Marcus led a team through the ventilation system, sealing contaminated sections, rerouting airflow, installing emergency filters at critical junctions. He worked alongside engineers who'd never set foot in the building's lower levels, teaching them the secrets he'd learned over 11 years of invisible labor. Twice, Victoria Crane came down to check on progress. Both times, Marcus barely acknowledged her, too focused on the work to deal with politics. The third time she came, she brought coffee. "For your team," she said, setting the tray on a nearby table. Marcus looked at her. She looked different than before, less polished, more real. Her suit was wrinkled. Her hair had escaped its careful arrangement. There was a smudge of dust on her cheek that she didn't seem to know about. "Thank you," he said. She nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Johnson." "Yeah. I was wrong. About you. About all of it." She paused. "I'm not good at apologies. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I didn't see before." Marcus wiped his hands on his work pants. "What do you see?" "Someone who cares more about doing the right thing than being right. Someone who keeps showing up even when nobody notices." She met his eyes. "Someone I should have listened to from the beginning." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "We're not done here. Not by a long shot. But when we are, maybe we can start over." "I'd like that." She walked away. Marcus watched her go, then turned back to his work. There were still lives to save. And he wasn't finished yet. At 3:47 a.m., the last contaminated section was sealed. Marcus stood in the basement corridor, his uniform soaked with sweat, his hands raw from hours of working with pipes and filters. Around him, the team he'd assembled sat against the walls, exhausted but triumphant. Dr. Harmon appeared at the end of the corridor, his face lined with fatigue, but his eyes bright with relief. "Air quality readings are normalizing across all floors. The CDC team confirmed we've contained it." Marcus nodded slowly. His body wanted to collapse, but his mind was already moving to the next problem. "What about the patients?" "Stable. All 11 are responding to treatment now that they're breathing clean air. The doctors are optimistic." "Optimistic isn't the same as cured." "No, but it's a hell of a lot better than where we were 12 hours ago." Marcus leaned against the wall, letting himself rest for just a moment. Somewhere above him, 40 floors of hospital were breathing easier because he'd refused to stay gone. "Where's Dr. Crane?" "Still in the command center. She hasn't slept in 36 hours. Someone should tell her to go home." Dr. Harmon smiled slightly. "You want to be the one to try?" "Not particularly." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Dr. Harmon spoke again. "The board is meeting at 9 a.m. They're going to want answers." "They should. People almost died because someone decided saving money was more important than saving lives. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious truth. You know it, I know it. And before this is over, everyone's going to know it." Dr. Harmon studied him carefully. "You really don't care about politics, do you?" "I care about my daughter. I care about doing my job right. Everything else is noise." Most people would take the win and keep their heads down. Most people didn't watch their wife die because a doctor was too busy to run a proper exam. The words hung in the air between them. Dr. Harmon's face changed, understanding settling into his features. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Nobody knows. That's the point. People like me were invisible until something breaks. Then suddenly everyone wants our help. But the moment the crisis is over, we go back to being ghosts. It doesn't have to be that way. Marcus pushed himself off the wall. Yeah, it does. Because that's how the system works. And people like Dr. Crane, they're too busy protecting the system to see who it's crushing. He started walking toward the elevator. Dr. Harmon called after him. Where are you going? To pick up my daughter from my neighbor's apartment. Then I'm going to sleep for about 4 hours. After that, I'll be back. The board meeting. I'll be there. Someone needs to tell them what really happened, and I don't think it's going to be anyone who's worried about their career. The elevator doors closed before Dr. Harmon could respond. Marcus arrived at Mrs. Patterson's apartment just as the sun was coming up. She was a retired nurse who'd lived in the building for 30 years, and she'd been watching Maya in emergencies since Jasmine died. She's still sleeping, Mrs. Patterson said, ushering him inside. Poor thing was up half the night asking when you'd be home. I'm sorry. I should have called more. You were saving lives. That's what matters. She patted his arm. Coffee's on the stove. You look like you need it. Marcus found Maya curled up on Mrs. Patterson's couch, wrapped in a blanket that was too big for her, clutching the stuffed elephant that Jasmine had given her on her 3rd birthday. He sat on the edge of the couch and gently brushed the hair from her face. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Daddy? Hey, baby girl. You came back? I always come back. She sat up and wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on like she was afraid he'd disappear. Mrs. Patterson said you were fixing the hospital. Something like that. Did you fix it? Most of it. There's still work to do. Maya pulled back and looked at him with those serious eyes that always saw too much. You look tired. I am tired. Are you going back? Later. First I'm going to take you home and make you breakfast. Then I'm going to sleep for a little while. Then yes, I have to go back. Because of the sick people. Because of a lot of things. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mama used to say that some people fix cars and some people fix computers. But you fix everything nobody else knows how to fix. Marcus felt his throat tighten. When did she say that? Lots of times. She said that's why she fell in love with you. Because you fixed the broken things in her heart. He couldn't speak. Couldn't do anything except hold his daughter and remember the woman who'd seen him as more than a uniform, more than a job, more than the invisible man everyone else looked past. I miss her, Daddy. I miss her too, baby. Every day. They sat together in the early morning light, father and daughter, holding on to each other, because that's what you do when the world keeps trying to tear you apart. 4 hours later, Marcus walked into the hospital boardroom, wearing the only suit he owned, a charcoal 2-button that Jasmine had bought him for their 5th anniversary. It was slightly out of style and didn't quite fit anymore, but it was clean and pressed, and it would have to do. The room was full of expensive people in expensive clothes, all of them staring at him like he'd wandered in from another planet. Victoria Crane sat at the head of the table, her composure restored, her armor back in place. But when she saw Marcus, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Maybe even respect. Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming. Didn't have much choice. Someone needed to tell the truth. A heavy-set man at the far end of the table leaned forward. His nameplate read, Richard Hayes, CFO. And what truth would that be, Mr. Johnson? Marcus recognized the type immediately. Smooth voice, expensive watch, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. The kind of man who'd never gotten his hands dirty in his life. The truth about why 11 people almost died in your hospital. The contamination was an unforeseen environmental issue. Our team has already... Your team missed it for 6 months. I didn't. The room went quiet. Richard Hayes's smile tightened. I'm sorry, who exactly are you? Marcus Johnson, night maintenance, 11 years in this building, 4 reports filed about the ventilation problem. 0 responses. I'm not sure what you think I think someone in this room decided that cutting the maintenance budget was more important than keeping patients safe. I think someone signed off on skipping quarterly inspections. I think someone looked at the numbers and decided that a few sick people were an acceptable cost of doing business. Richard Hayes stood up slowly. That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Johnson. It's not an accusation, it's a fact, and I've got the documentation to prove it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, set it on the table in front of Victoria. 4 reports, all time-stamped, all ignored, plus the maintenance budget from 2 years ago compared to last year. Someone cut it by 40%. That someone also eliminated the third-party inspection contract that would have caught the contamination before it spread. Victoria opened the folder. Her face went pale as she read. Where did you get these? I'm a janitor. I clean offices. People leave things on their desks. People assume I can't read. Richard Hayes slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. We're not going to sit here and be lectured by a custodian who saved your hospital. Marcus cut him off. Who spent 6 hours in your basement doing the job your engineers couldn't do? Who kept 11 patients from dying because somebody in this room decided their lives weren't worth the cost of basic maintenance? He looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes. You want to know who I am? I'm the man who mops your floors, who empties your trash, who fixes your problems at midnight while you're sleeping in your lakeside condos. I'm invisible to you. I've always been invisible, but that doesn't mean I don't see everything. Victoria closed the folder slowly. Richard, these budget authorizations have your signature. I can explain? Can you? Because from what I'm reading, you personally approved the elimination of safety protocols that directly contributed to a potential epidemic in our facility. Those were cost-saving measures endorsed by the entire financial committee. They were your recommendations, your signatures, your decisions. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Marcus watched Richard Hayes's face transform from confidence to fear in the space of seconds. Victoria, let's not be hasty. This man is a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. We can't take his word over. It's not his word, Richard. It's documentation. Time-stamped signed documentation that shows exactly who's responsible for what happened here. Marcus stepped back from the table. His work was done. The truth was out. What they did with it was their problem. I'm not here to tell you how to run your hospital, he said. I'm here to make sure you can't pretend you didn't know. Whatever happens next is on you. He walked toward the door. Victoria's voice stopped him. Mr. Johnson? He turned. Thank you. For everything. He nodded once and walked out. Behind him, he could hear the raised voices beginning. The arguments, the blame, the desperate scramble to decide who would pay for the sins of the institution. He didn't care. He had a daughter to raise and a life to rebuild. But as he walked through the hospital lobby, something made him stop. Look around. See the nurses rushing past the patients in wheelchairs, the families clustered in waiting areas with fear and hope written on their faces. This was what it was all about. Not the politics, not the power, not the money. Just people trying to survive. Just people who deserved better than they got. He pushed through the front doors and stepped into the sunlight. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Maya wants to know if you're coming home for dinner. He typed back, yes. Tell her we're celebrating tonight. Celebrating what? Marcus looked back at the hospital, then at the sky, then at the city spreading out around him. Celebrating, doing the right thing. 3 days passed. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was making breakfast when his phone started buzzing. Then it didn't stop. Reporters, journalists, news stations, everyone wanted a piece of the story. Hospital janitor exposes cover-up, saves 11 lives. He ignored most of the calls, gave one interview to a local reporter who promised to tell the story right, watched as the hospital scrambled to control the narrative while the truth spread faster than they could contain it. Richard Hayes was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 2 other executives resigned. The board announced a complete review of all safety protocols and maintenance procedures. And Victoria Crane held a press conference where she said the words Marcus never expected to hear. "We failed. I failed. A member of our maintenance staff tried to warn us about a serious safety issue, and we didn't listen. Worse, we terminated his employment for trying to do the right thing. That's unacceptable, and I take full responsibility." She went on to announce that Marcus had been reinstated with a promotion to Director of Facility Safety, a new position created specifically to prevent this kind of disaster from happening again. Marcus watched the press conference on his phone while Maya ate her cereal. "Daddy, is that the mean lady?" "Yeah, baby, that's her. She doesn't look mean anymore. She looks sad." Sometimes people change, baby. Sometimes they just need someone to show them what they couldn't see before. Maya considered this. "Like when you taught me how to tie my shoes, I couldn't see how to do it until you showed me." Marcus smiled. "Exactly like that. So maybe she's not bad. Maybe she just couldn't see. Maybe." "Are you going to work for her again?" "I don't know yet. We'll see." That afternoon, Victoria Crane showed up at his apartment. She stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable, out of place, like a woman who'd never had to knock on doors that didn't lead to corner offices. "Dr. Crane? Mr. Johnson, may I come in?" He stepped aside. She walked into the apartment and looked around at the second-hand furniture, the photos on the wall, the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. "I owe you an apology. A real one." "You already apologized." "Words. That was just words. This is different." She turned to face him. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. I walked into this job thinking I knew how to run a hospital because I had the right degrees and the right experience and the right attitude. But I didn't know anything. Not about the people who actually keep this place running. Not about the cost of pretending that efficiency is more important than humanity." Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter. "What do you want from me, Dr. Crane?" "I want you to take the job, the real one. Director of Facility Safety. Full benefits, competitive salary, a seat at the table where decisions get made. And in return, you help me fix what's broken. Not just the ventilation system, everything. The culture, the priorities, the way we treat people who don't have titles or degrees." She paused. "I need someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. Someone who sees what I can't see. Someone who gives a damn about more than the bottom line." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "My wife died because a doctor didn't listen. Didn't look. Didn't care enough to ask the right questions." Victoria's face softened. "I know. Dr. Harmon told me. I spent 4 years blaming every hospital and every doctor for what happened to her. Every time I walked through those halls at night, I thought about how the system had failed her, failed us, failed Maya. I'm sorry. But then I realized something. The system doesn't fail on its own. People fail. People who are too busy, too tired, too scared to see what's right in front of them. People like you." Victoria flinched. "And people like me," Marcus continued. "I spent 11 years being invisible because it was easier. Because I told myself that staying quiet was the same as staying safe. But it wasn't. It was just another way of letting the system win." He pushed off the counter and took a step toward her. "I'll take the job. But not because of the money or the title. I'll take it because Maya needs to see that her father doesn't give up. That fighting for what's right matters even when it costs you everything. That the people who clean floors and empty bedpans and work through the night are just as important as the people who sign the paychecks." Victoria nodded slowly. "Then we have a deal. We have the start of something. What it turns into depends on you." She extended her hand. Marcus took it. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Marcus, if we're going to work together, you might as well call me by my name. For the first time since he'd met her, Victoria Crane smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. Then call me Victoria. And Marcus, yeah. I meant what I said at the press conference. I take responsibility for what happened, all of it, including what I did to you that night. I know. How do you know? Marcus looked at her. Because you're here, in my apartment, asking for help instead of giving orders. That's not something the woman I met 3 days ago would have done. No, it's not. So what changed? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You did. When you walked into that basement and started working without asking for recognition or credit or anything except the chance to help. When you put those documents in front of the board and didn't back down. When you made me see what I'd been refusing to look at. She took a breath. I've spent my whole career trying to be the smartest person in the room. But being smart isn't the same as being wise. And it's definitely not the same as being good. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the beginning of something that might become forgiveness, given enough time. We've got a long way to go, he said. I know. And I'm not going to make it easy on you. I wouldn't expect you to. Then I guess we start tomorrow. Victoria nodded and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. Marcus, yeah. Your daughter. Maya. What did you tell her about what happened about me? He thought about it. I told her that sometimes people can't see what's right in front of them, and sometimes all they need is someone to show them. Victoria's eyes glistened. And what did she say? She said maybe you're not bad. Maybe you just couldn't see. Victoria stood very still for a moment. Then she nodded once and walked out. Marcus watched her go. Then he went to the window and looked out at the city, at the hospital towers rising in the distance, at the streets full of people rushing to jobs that nobody noticed, at a world that was broken in 1,000 ways, but still managed to hold together. His phone buzzed. A text from the school. Maya's art project won first place. Parent viewing at 4 p.m. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Some things couldn't wait. Some things mattered more than hospitals and boards and corner offices. His daughter had won first place, and he wasn't going to miss it for the world. The school auditorium was packed with parents when Marcus arrived. He squeezed through the crowd, nodding at faces he half recognized from drop-offs and pickups until he found Maya standing next to a table displaying her artwork. It was a painting. Simple. Bold. Done in the confident strokes of a child who hadn't yet learned to doubt herself. A man in a blue uniform stood in the center, his arms raised like he was holding up a building. Around him, people of all colors and sizes reached toward him, their faces turned upward, like he was the sun. The title was written in Maya's careful handwriting. My Dad, the Invisible Hero. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the painting, feeling something crack open inside him that he'd been holding closed for years. Do you like it, Daddy? He looked down. Maya was watching him with those serious eyes waiting for his verdict. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Her face lit up. Really? Really? The teacher said it was very creative. She asked me who the invisible hero was. I said it was you. What did she say? She said she didn't know janitors were heroes. I told her that's because she never watched one work. Marcus laughed. For the first time in days, he really laughed. That's my girl. Are you crying, Daddy? He wiped his eyes. Maybe a little. Mama used to say crying was just the heart taking a bath. She did say that. I miss her. I miss her too, baby. Every single day. Maya reached up and took his hand. But she'd be proud of you, for fixing the hospital, for making the mean lady not mean anymore, for being the invisible hero. Marcus squeezed her hand. You know what, Maya, I think you're the real hero. You remind me every day why I get up and fight. That's what heroes do, Daddy. They remind each other. They stood there in the crowded auditorium, father and daughter, surrounded by strangers who would never know the battles they'd fought or the losses they'd survived. But that was okay. Some victories didn't need an audience. Some heroes didn't need to be seen. All they needed was each other. 2 weeks into his new position, Marcus discovered that the ventilation crisis was only the beginning. He was reviewing maintenance logs in his new office on the 4th floor when the numbers stopped making sense. Equipment purchases that didn't match inventory. Service contracts with companies that didn't seem to exist. Thousands of dollars flowing out of the facilities budget into accounts that disappeared the moment he tried to trace them. Someone was stealing from the hospital, and they'd been doing it for years. Marcus spread the documents across his desk, connecting dots that nobody else had bothered to look for. The pattern was careful, methodical, almost invisible. Small amounts here and there buried in legitimate expenses, hidden behind vendor names that sounded real, but led nowhere. He picked up his phone and called Dr. Harmon. "I need to see you, now." "What's wrong?" "Everything." 20 minutes later, they sat in Dr. Harmon's office with the door locked and the blinds closed. "This is embezzlement," Dr. Harmon said, flipping through the documents. "Systematic long-term embezzlement. At least 3 years based on what I've found, maybe longer. Who has access to these accounts? That's the problem. Only 2 people have authorization to approve facilities expenditures at this level." Dr. Harmon looked up. Richard Hayes and Victoria Crane. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. "You can't possibly think Victoria." "I don't think anything yet. I'm just telling you what the records show. Someone's been draining money from this hospital, and they've been using safety and maintenance as cover. That's why the budgets kept getting cut. That's why the ventilation system wasn't maintained. It wasn't negligence. It was theft." Dr. Harmon set the papers down. "If this is true, we're talking about millions of dollars. We're talking about criminal prosecution. We're talking about the end of careers, maybe the end of the hospital itself." "I know." "What do you want to do?" Marcus leaned forward. "I want to find out who's responsible, and I want to make sure they pay for every patient who suffered because of their greed." "That's not going to be easy. Richard Hayes has connections. Board members, politicians, donors. If you go after him without ironclad proof, he'll destroy you." "Then I'll get ironclad proof." Dr. Harmon studied him for a long moment. "You're not afraid of him." "I've faced worse than a man in a suit who thinks money makes him untouchable." "This isn't a battlefield, Marcus. Every place is a battlefield. The only difference is the weapons." That night, Marcus stayed late. The hospital grew quiet around him as he dug deeper into the financial records, following trails that led through shell companies and offshore accounts. The more he found, the worse it got. Richard Hayes wasn't just stealing money. He was selling something. Patient data, medical records, research files, thousands of confidential documents flowing out of the hospital to buyers whose identities were hidden behind layers of encryption. Marcus was so focused on his computer screen that he didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped at his door. "Working late." He looked up. Victoria stood in the doorway, her coat folded over her arm, her briefcase in her hand. "You could say that." She stepped inside and set her briefcase on the chair across from his desk. "What are you working on?" Marcus hesitated. He still didn't know if he could trust her. The evidence pointed to Richard Hayes, but the authorization codes showed both their names. Until he knew for sure, he couldn't risk tipping anyone off. "Just going through old maintenance records, trying to make sure we didn't miss anything during the contamination response." Victoria nodded slowly. Her eyes moved across his desk, taking in the scattered papers, the open laptop, the coffee cups that had multiplied over the hours. "You've been doing that a lot lately. Staying late? Working alone? Old habits? Or new suspicions?" Marcus met her gaze. She was watching him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" I mean, I've noticed that you're looking into things that don't seem to have anything to do with facilities safety, financial records, vendor contracts, things that are outside your job description. My job is to make sure this hospital is safe. That includes understanding where the money goes. Victoria sat down in the chair across from him. She moved her briefcase to the floor and folded her hands in her lap. 3 weeks ago, you walked into a boardroom and exposed Richard Hayes for cutting safety protocols. You had documentation that nobody else had thought to gather. You saw patterns that nobody else saw. I was just doing my job. No, you were doing something else, something that scared a lot of powerful people. She paused. Richard hasn't been the same since that meeting. He's nervous, making mistakes, covering his tracks in ways that draw more attention than they deflect. Marcus said nothing, waited. I know he's stealing from this hospital, Victoria said quietly. I've known for about 6 months. The admission hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. You knew. I suspected, but I couldn't prove it. Every time I got close to evidence, it disappeared. Every person I asked questions to either couldn't remember or suddenly quit. Richard has built a very effective system for protecting himself. Then why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you go to the board? Because the board is compromised. Richard has allies everywhere. People who owe him favors, people who benefit from looking the other way. I tried to build a case on my own, but I was running out of time. Running out of time for what? Victoria's expression darkened. Richard is planning something. I don't know exactly what, but I've heard whispers. Conversations that stop when I walk into the room. Meetings that aren't on any official calendar. What kind of meetings? The kind that happen in parking garages and empty offices after midnight. The kind that involve people who don't work for this hospital. Marcus felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. You think he knows you're onto him? I think he's known for a while. That's why he pushed so hard to have you fired. You weren't just a janitor who got too close to the ventilation problem. You were a threat to his entire operation. Because I saw the patterns. Because you're the kind of person who doesn't stop asking questions. The kind of person who can't be bought or intimidated. Richard recognized that immediately. That's why he wanted you gone. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So what now? We go to the police. We can't. Not yet. Richard has people in the department. People who will make sure any investigation gets buried before it starts. Then what do you suggest? Victoria reached into her briefcase and pulled out a flash drive. She set it on the desk between them. I've been gathering evidence for months. Bank records, email transcripts, shipping manifests. It's not complete, but it's enough to prove that something illegal is happening. What I need is someone who can find the rest. Someone who knows this building well enough to access the places Richard thinks are secure. Marcus looked at the flash drive, then at her. You want me to break into his files. I want you to find the truth, however you have to do it. That could be dangerous. I know. I have a daughter. I know that too. Victoria's voice softened. I wouldn't ask if there was another way. But Richard is planning to disappear. I can feel it. He's been liquidating assets, moving money, tying up loose ends. If we don't stop him soon, he'll be gone. And so will every piece of evidence that could bring him down. Marcus thought about Maya, about the promises he'd made, about the life he was trying to build for both of them. Then he thought about the 11 patients who'd almost died. About Jasmine, who had died because someone somewhere had decided that cutting corners was more important than saving lives. About all the invisible people who suffered because powerful men thought they were above consequences. He picked up the flash drive. Tell me everything you know. The next 3 days were a blur of surveillance and reconnaissance. Marcus mapped Richard Hayes's movements, noted his patterns, identified the blind spots in the hospital's security system. He learned which doors Richard used, which offices he visited, which people he met with in shadows. On the 4th night, Marcus made his move. The executive floor was empty at 2 a.m. Richard's office was locked, but Marcus had spent 11 years learning how to get into places he wasn't supposed to be. The lock yielded in 30 seconds. Inside, he worked quickly. Richard's computer was protected by multiple layers of encryption, but the physical files in his desk were more accessible. Marcus photographed everything: bank statements, contracts, correspondence with names he didn't recognize but would research later. Then he found the folder labeled Project Clearwater. Inside were documents that made his blood run cold: patient data being sold to pharmaceutical companies, research files from the hospital's experimental treatment program, medical records of vulnerable people being traded like commodities, and worse, evidence that the ventilation contamination hadn't been an accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the maintenance schedule to create a crisis that would distract from the real crimes happening behind the scenes. Marcus was photographing the last page when he heard footsteps in the hallway. He killed the flashlight and pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. Keys jingled. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Richard Hayes stepped inside and flipped on the lights. For a moment, neither man moved. Richard stood frozen in the doorway, his face cycling through surprise recognition and finally cold calculation. "Mr. Johnson, I was wondering when you'd make your move." Marcus didn't respond. His eyes swept the room, calculating exits, distances, odds. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Richard stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "The way you've been digging through records, asking questions, staying late in your office when everyone else goes home. You've been watching me." "I've been watching everyone. That's how I've survived this long, by seeing threats before they materialize." "Is that what I am? A threat?" Richard smiled. It was the smile of a man who had stopped pretending a long time ago. "You're an inconvenience, one that I should have dealt with more permanently the first time." Marcus heard movement behind him. He turned just as two men emerged from the shadows of the inner office. Big men, professional men, the kind who got paid to solve problems without leaving evidence. "The thing about invisible people," Richard said, "is that no one notices when they disappear." The first man lunged. Marcus sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to send him crashing into the desk. The second man was faster. His fist connected with Marcus's ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Marcus dropped low, swept the man's legs, and came up swinging. His knuckles connected with bone. The man stumbled back, blood streaming from his nose. But there were more of them now, flooding in from the hallway. Too many to fight. Too many to escape. A blow caught Marcus on the back of the head. The world tilted. He hit the floor hard. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Richard Hayes standing over him, adjusting his cuffs with casual indifference. "Clean this up, and make sure he's not found until we're long gone." Marcus woke to pain. His head throbbed. His ribs screamed with every breath. His hands were bound behind his back with plastic zip ties that cut into his wrists. He was in the basement. He recognized the smell: damp concrete, old machinery, the faint chemical tang of the cleaning supplies stored in the maintenance closet down the hall. "You're awake." Richard Hayes sat in a folding chair a few feet away, illuminated by a single work light hanging from a pipe overhead. "I considered killing you immediately. It would have been simpler. But I wanted to understand something first." Marcus said nothing, focused on his breathing, on the bindings around his wrists, on the layout of the room and the location of every potential weapon. "Why do you care?" Richard leaned forward. "You're a janitor, a nobody. You have nothing to gain from any of this. Why risk your life for a hospital that threw you away like garbage?" "Because someone has to." Richard laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. "Someone has to. That's your answer. That's why you're lying on a concrete floor with a concussion and broken ribs. Some things matter more than survival. Like what? Justice, morality. Those are fairy tales people tell themselves so they can sleep at night. The real world runs on money and power. Everything else is decoration." Marcus tested the zip ties. Tight, but not unbreakable. He'd need time. He needed to keep Richard talking. Is that what you tell yourself when you sell patient data to the highest bidder? When you let people get sick so you can cover your tracks? Richard's smile faded. Those patients were acceptable losses, collateral damage in a much larger operation. Do you have any idea how much money flows through a hospital like this? How many people are willing to pay for access to medical research, experimental treatments, confidential records? You're a monster. I'm a businessman. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. The same as anyone else in my position would have done. Not everyone. Not Victoria. Richard's expression flickered. Something dark moved behind his eyes. Ah, yes, Victoria. My biggest disappointment. He stood up and began to pace. I handpicked her for this job, groomed her for years. I thought she understood how the game was played, but she turned out to be like you, full of inconvenient principles. She's going to stop you. No, she's not. Richard pulled out his phone and checked the time. In about 20 minutes, a very unfortunate electrical fire is going to break out in the hospital's main server room. It's going to destroy every piece of evidence that Victoria has been gathering. Every backup, every encrypted file, every trail that leads back to me. Marcus's blood went cold. The patients will be evacuated safely, probably. I'm not a complete monster, Mr. Johnson, just a practical one. And Victoria? Richard's smile returned. Victoria is going to be in the server room when the fire starts. A tragic accident. The dedicated CEO working late, caught in a blaze she couldn't escape. The board will mourn, the press will eulogize, and I will quietly assume control of everything she built. Marcus struggled against his bonds. I'll kill you. No, you won't. Because in about 30 seconds my associates are going to come through that door and finish what they started upstairs. And then you're going to disappear. Just another invisible man who nobody will miss. The door opened. The two men from before stepped inside, their faces expressionless, their hands gloved. Richard straightened his jacket. Goodbye, Mr. Johnson. For what it's worth, I respected your persistence. In another life, you might have made a useful employee. He walked out without looking back. The men advanced. Marcus had maybe 15 seconds before they reached him. 15 seconds to break free, to fight to survive. He thought about Maya, about the promise he'd made to Jasmine, about everything he still needed to do to say to be. Then he stopped thinking and started moving. He'd been working on the zip ties since he woke up, twisting his wrists, creating friction, weakening the plastic. Now he gave one final violent wrench and felt them snap. The first man didn't see the punch coming. It caught him in the throat, dropping him to his knees, gasping for air. The second man was faster. He pulled a knife. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed a length of pipe from the floor and swung. The knife clattered away. The man staggered back, clutching his broken wrist. Marcus hit him again, and again, until he stopped moving. Then he ran. The hospital corridors blurred past him as he sprinted toward the server room. His ribs screamed. His head pounded. Every step sent jolts of agony through his battered body. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Victoria was in danger. The hospital was in danger. Everything he'd fought for was about to go up in flames. He reached the server room just as the smoke began to pour from under the door. Victoria! No answer. He kicked the door once, twice. On the third kick it flew open. Smoke and heat hit him like a wall. Through the haze he could see flames licking at the server racks, spreading faster than they should have. Accelerant. Richard had made sure the fire would be thorough. And in the center of the room, slumped against a server cabinet, was Victoria. Marcus didn't think. He dove through the flames, grabbed her under the arms, and dragged her toward the door. The heat was unbearable. His uniform was starting to smolder. His lungs burned with every breath. But he kept moving. He pulled her into the hallway just as the fire suppression system finally kicked in. Foam rained down, dousing the flames, filling the air with chemical mist. Marcus collapsed against the wall, Victoria's unconscious body cradled in his arms. Come on. Wake up, please. Her eyes fluttered, opened, focused on his face. Marcus, I've got you. You're safe. She coughed, her body convulsing. Richard, I know everything. He's going to run. He has a plane waiting. Let him run. Right now, all that matters is getting you out of here. He helped her to her feet. They leaned on each other, two battered people holding each other up, and began the long walk toward safety. Behind them, the alarms began to wail. They made it to the lobby just as the first responders arrived. Firefighters rushed past them, headed for the server room. Paramedics swarmed Victoria, checking her vitals, asking questions she was too dazed to answer. Marcus stood apart from the chaos, watching, waiting his body, running on nothing but adrenaline and stubborn refusal to quit. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won, this isn't over. Marcus looked at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, You're right, it isn't. He pocketed the phone and walked toward the ambulance where Victoria was being treated. There was still work to do. Richard Hayes was still out there. The evidence might be destroyed, but the truth was still alive, and Marcus Johnson wasn't finished yet. Hours later, Marcus sat in a hospital room, not as a patient, as a guardian. Victoria lay in the bed, oxygen mask over her face of V and her arm monitors beeping steadily. The doctors said she'd inhaled too much smoke, but she'd recover. She was lucky. They were both lucky. Marcus hadn't left her side since the ambulance brought them in. Hadn't slept. Hadn't eaten. Hadn't done anything except sit and watch and think about what came next. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he recognized. Mrs. Patterson. Marcus, Maya's asking for you. She saw the news. The fire at the hospital. He closed his eyes. Tell her I'm okay. Tell her I'll be home soon. She's scared, Marcus. I know. I'll be there. I promise. He hung up and looked at Victoria. She was watching him, her eyes open, the oxygen mask pulled down to her chin. Go. What? Go to your daughter. She needs you more than I do right now. Richard is still out there. You're not safe. The hospital is crawling with police. I'll be fine. She reached out and touched his hand. You've already saved me twice. You don't have to sit here and watch me breathe. Marcus hesitated. Every instinct told him to stay, to protect, to finish what he'd started. But Victoria was right. Maya needed him, had always needed him, and he'd spent too many nights putting the job ahead of his daughter. I'll be back tomorrow. I know you will. He stood up and walked toward the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. Victoria. Yes. When this is over, when Richard is caught and the hospital is safe, what happens then? She smiled weakly. Then we figure out what comes next, together. Marcus nodded. He didn't know what that meant exactly. Didn't know what kind of future was possible for two people who'd been through what they'd been through. But for the first time in a long time, he wanted to find out. He walked out of the room and headed home to his daughter. Maya was waiting at the door when he arrived. She flew into his arms before he could even get his key out of the lock. Daddy. I'm here, baby. I'm okay. Mrs. Patterson said there was a fire. She said people got hurt. Some people got hurt, but I'm fine. See, not a scratch. That was a lie. He had plenty of scratches and bruises, and probably a cracked rib or two. But Maya didn't need to know that. Not now. Were you scared, Daddy? A little bit. What did you do when you were scared? Marcus held her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. I thought about you. About coming home to you. That made me brave enough to do what I had to do. Maya pulled back and looked at him with those serious eyes. Mama said you were the bravest person she ever knew. Your mama was braver than me. She said you would say that. Maya smiled. She also said that one day you would find someone who would help you be brave when you couldn't do it alone. Did you find that person, Daddy? Marcus thought about Victoria, about the way she'd trusted him with her secrets, about the way she'd told him to go home to his daughter, about the way she'd said together. Maybe I did, baby. Maybe I did. They went inside and Marcus made dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled cheese and tomato soup, the meal Jasmine used to make when the world felt too heavy. They ate in comfortable silence, father and daughter survivors of storms nobody else could see. And for one night at least, the world outside couldn't touch them. The call came at 6 a.m. Marcus was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee and a legal pad full of notes. He'd spent the night piecing together everything he remembered from Richard's office, every document he'd photographed, every connection he'd made before the beating scrambled his thoughts. Dr. Harmon's name flashed on his phone. They found him. Marcus set down his coffee. Where? Private airfield outside the city. He was trying to board a charter flight to the Caymans. FBI intercepted him 20 minutes ago. FBI. Victoria woke up around midnight and started making calls. Turns out she had backup copies of everything stored on a secure server outside the hospital network. Richard thought he destroyed the evidence, but he only got the decoys. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. So it's over. The arrest is over. The investigation is just beginning. They're going to need your statement. Everything you saw, everything Richard said to you in that basement. I'll be there. Marcus. Dr. Harmon paused. What you did last night, running into that fire, saving Victoria, that's going to be in every newspaper in the city by noon. I didn't do it for the newspapers. I know. That's why it matters. Marcus hung up and sat in the silence of his kitchen. Outside, the sun was coming up, painting the windows gold. Somewhere across the city, Richard Hayes was in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him. It should have felt like victory. But all Marcus could think about was how close he'd come to never seeing Maya again. Daddy! He turned. Maya stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Hey, baby girl, you're up early. I heard you talking. She padded across the kitchen and climbed into his lap. Was that about the bad man? Yeah, they caught him. He's not going to hurt anyone else. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing this the way she processed everything, with a seriousness that made her seem older than her years. Are you happy? Marcus thought about the question, really thought about it. I'm relieved. I'm grateful. But happy. He shook his head slowly. I don't know if happy is the right word. A lot of people got hurt because of what he did. That doesn't go away just because he's in handcuffs. But you stopped him. That's good, right? It's better than not stopping him. But the best thing would have been if someone had stopped him years ago before anyone got hurt at all. Maya leaned her head against his chest. Mama used to say you can't fix yesterday. You can only fix today. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She said that lots of times. Usually when I was sad about something, I couldn't change. He held his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the weight of her small body against his chest. Your mama was the smartest person I ever knew. I know. Maya pulled back and looked at him. Daddy, is the hospital lady okay? Victoria. Yeah, she's okay. She's going to be fine. Good. Maya nodded seriously. I think she needs you. What makes you say that? Because she looks at you the way Mama used to, like you're the only person who can make things better. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if there was anything to say. Come on, he finally managed. Let's make some breakfast. The FBI field office was cold and institutional. Marcus sat in an interview room for 3 hours, recounting every detail of the past weeks, from the ventilation crisis to the basement confrontation to the fire. The agents listened without interruption, took notes, asked clarifying questions. When it was finally over, the lead agent, a woman named Torres, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned back in her chair. Mr. Johnson, You understand that what you did was extremely dangerous. Breaking into Hayes's office, confronting him alone, running into a burning building. I understand. You could have been killed. Probably should have been killed based on what you've described. I'm aware. And yet you did it anyway. Marcus met her gaze. I did what needed to be done. Someone had to. Torres studied him for a long moment. I've been doing this job for 18 years. I've met a lot of people who claim to be heroes. Most of them were just idiots with a death wish, or narcissists looking for attention. I'm neither of those things. No, you're not. She closed her notebook. You're the real thing, Mr. Johnson, and I don't say that lightly. Does that mean I'm free to go? It means you're free to go, and also that we'd like you to testify when this goes to trial. Hayes's lawyers are already trying to suppress evidence and discredit witnesses. Having someone with your credibility on the stand could make the difference. I'll testify. Good. Torres stood and extended her hand. Thank you for your cooperation. And for what it's worth, thank you for what you did. A lot of people are alive because of you. Marcus shook her hand. Just doing my job. Your job is facility safety. What you did goes considerably beyond that. Then I guess I need a new job description. He left the FBI office and drove straight to the hospital. Victoria was sitting up in bed when he arrived, her color better, her eyes clearer. She smiled when she saw him. You look terrible. Gee. 3 hours with the FBI will do that to you. Tell me about it. They were here for 2 hours this morning. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. Sit. You look like you're about to fall over. Marcus sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, the kind that exists between people who have been through something together that words can't quite capture. Thank you, Victoria said finally, for saving my life. You would have done the same for me. Would I? She looked away. 6 weeks ago I threw a mop at you and had you escorted out of the building. I'm not sure I would have crossed the street to help you, let alone run into a burning building. That was 6 weeks ago. A lot has changed. Has it? She turned back to him. Or have I just been forced to see what was always there? Marcus considered the question. Maybe both. Change isn't just about becoming something new. Sometimes it's about finally seeing who you really are. And who am I, Marcus, really? You're someone who cares more than she wants to admit. Someone who's been so busy being strong that she forgot how to ask for help. Someone who built walls so high she couldn't see the people trying to reach her. Victoria's eyes glistened. That's a very generous interpretation. It's the truth. The same truth your employees see every day. The same truth I saw when you came to my apartment and asked for my help. I didn't ask. I demanded. You showed up. That's what mattered. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, still trembling slightly from the trauma of the night before. I don't know how to do this, Marcus. I don't know how to be vulnerable. I don't know how to let people in. Neither do I. But I'm learning. How? By trusting people who've earned it. By admitting when I'm wrong. By letting my daughter teach me things I thought I already knew. Victoria smiled softly. She sounds remarkable. She is. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'd like to meet her. Properly, I mean. Not in a hospital corridor in the middle of a crisis. Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. She'd like that too. She's been asking about you. Really? What does she ask? She wanted to know if you were okay. And she told me that you need me. He paused. The way her mother used to need me. Victoria's grip tightened on his hand. Maya said that. Yeah. She's very perceptive. She gets it from her mother. They sat in silence for a while longer. Hands intertwined, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of a crisis neither had expected. What happens now? Victoria asked. Now you rest. Heal. Let the FBI do their job. And you? I go home to my daughter. Wait for the trial. Try to figure out what a normal life looks like. Will you come back to the hospital, I mean? To the job. Marcus thought about it. The hospital had given him purpose, but it had also almost killed him. The work mattered, but so did being present for Maya. Being alive for Maya. I don't know yet. I need some time to think. Take all the time you need. The position will be waiting for you whenever you're ready. And if I'm never ready? Victoria met his eyes. Then I'll find another way to keep you in my life, if you'll let me. Marcus didn't answer immediately. There was too much to process, too many emotions competing for attention. But when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. I'll let you. The trial began 6 months later. Marcus had spent the intervening time rebuilding, healing, learning how to be present in ways he hadn't been before. He'd taken a leave of absence from the hospital, using the time to focus on Maya, to be there for school plays and parent-teacher conferences, to make up for all the nights he'd spent in basements and corridors while she slept alone. Victoria had recovered, fully returning to her position as CEO with a renewed sense of purpose. She'd implemented sweeping changes, overhauling safety protocols, establishing whistleblower protections, creating programs to recognize and support the invisible workers who kept the hospital running. And she'd started showing up at Marcus's apartment for dinner. Once a week at first, then twice. Maya had taken to her, immediately recognizing something in Victoria that the rest of the world rarely saw. She's sad inside, Maya had observed one evening after Victoria left. But she's getting less sad. How can you tell? Because she laughs now. Real laughs, not pretend ones. Marcus had no response to that. His daughter saw everything. The courthouse was packed on the day Marcus testified. Reporters, lawyers, spectators all crammed into a room that felt too small for the weight of what was happening. Richard Hayes sat at the defense table, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his confidence dimmed but not extinguished. He watched Marcus approach the witness stand with eyes that burned with barely contained fury. Mr. Johnson, please describe for the court what you witnessed on the night of October 14th. Marcus spoke clearly, calmly, recounting every detail of that terrible night. The office break-in, the confrontation, the beating, the basement, Richard's confession. He told me that the patients who got sick were acceptable losses. Collateral damage, he called them. He said he was a businessman, not a monster. And did you believe him? No. Businessmen don't try to murder people who get in their way. Businessmen don't set fires to destroy evidence. Businessmen don't sell patient data to the highest bidder. Objection. Richard's lawyer rose. The witness is offering opinions, not facts. Overruled. The witness may continue. Marcus looked directly at Richard. What he did wasn't business. It was greed, pure and simple. He saw an opportunity to profit from other people's suffering, and he took it without a second thought for who got hurt. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment. Something ugly flashed in his eyes before he regained control. No further questions. The cross-examination was brutal. Richard's lawyer attacked Marcus's credibility, his motives, his judgment. He tried to paint Marcus as a disgruntled employee with a vendetta, a man who'd broken into offices and assaulted security personnel. Isn't it true, Mr. Johnson, that you broke into Mr. Hayes's office without authorization? Yes. And isn't it true that you physically attacked multiple individuals on the night in question? I defended myself against people who were trying to kill me. So you say. But isn't it also true that you have a personal grudge against my client, that he was responsible for your termination several weeks earlier? He was responsible for a lot of things. My termination was the least of them. You didn't answer the question, Mr. Johnson. Marcus leaned forward. You want to know if I have a grudge against Richard Hayes? Yeah, I do. He almost killed Victoria Crane. He almost killed me. He let patients suffer and die so he could line his pockets. And if having a grudge against someone like that makes me less credible, then I guess every person in this room with a conscience is less credible too. The courtroom was silent. Richard's lawyer had no follow-up. After the testimony, Victoria found Marcus in the hallway. She looked tired but triumphant. "You destroyed him in there." "I told the truth. That's all." "That's not all. You made the jury see him for what he really is. His lawyers have been spinning narratives for months trying to turn him into a victim of circumstance. You cut through all of it." "Will it be enough?" "I think so. The evidence is overwhelming. Your testimony just made sure the jury understood why it matters." They stood together in the corridor watching the crowds flow past lawyers and reporters and curious onlookers, all caught up in a drama that had consumed the city for half a year. "Maya asked about you this morning," Marcus said. "What did she ask?" "She wanted to know if you'd come to her dance recital next week." Victoria's face softened. "She did. She's been practicing for months. She said she wants you to see." "I'd love to come, if that's okay with you." "It's more than okay." Marcus hesitated, then added, "She also asked if you were going to be around more. Permanently, I mean." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know, that it depended on a lot of things." "What things?" Marcus turned to face her. "Whether you want to be around, whether I'm ready to let someone in again, whether we can figure out how to build something together instead of just surviving crises." Victoria took his hand. "I want to be around Marcus. I want to figure this out, but I don't know how to do it right. I've never been good at this part." "Neither have I. But Maya told me something once. She said that heroes remind each other. Maybe that's what we do. Remind each other how to be brave when we can't do it alone." "Your daughter is very wise. She gets it from her mother. And from her father." They stood together in the fluorescent light of the courthouse corridor, two people who had been through fire and come out the other side. The future was uncertain, full of complications and challenges they couldn't predict. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since Jasmine died. Hope. The verdict came 3 weeks later. Guilty on all counts. Richard Hayes was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. As the judge read the sentence, Richard sat motionless, his face a mask of disbelief. He'd spent his whole life believing he was untouchable. Now he was going to die in a cell. Marcus watched from the gallery, Victoria beside him, Maya between them, holding both their hands. "Is the bad man going to jail forever?" Maya whispered. "For a very long time," Marcus whispered back. "Good." After the sentencing, they walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Marcus ignored them all, focused only on the two people beside him. "What do you want to do now?" Victoria asked. Marcus looked at Maya. "What do you think, baby girl ice cream?" Maya's face lit up. "Yes. Can we go to the place with the sprinkles?" "Any place you want." They walked down the courthouse steps together, past the cameras and the chaos, past the reporters calling out for comments. Just 3 people walking into a future that was finally starting to feel possible. At the ice cream shop, Maya ordered chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Victoria got vanilla, claiming she was boring. Marcus got butter pecan, the same flavor Jasmine used to love. They sat at a small table by the window, eating their ice cream in comfortable silence. "Daddy," Maya said, her face already covered in chocolate. "Yeah, baby." "Is Victoria going to live with us now?" Marcus nearly choked on his ice cream. Victoria's cheeks flushed red. "Maya, we talked about this. I know it's complicated. But I already asked her, and she said she wants to. So why can't she?" Marcus looked at Victoria. "You told her you want to live with us." "She asked me last week. She was very direct about it. I may have said something about wanting to spend more time with both of you." Victoria. I didn't mean right now. I just meant eventually, when the time is right, if the time is ever right. Maya wiped her mouth with her napkin. The time is right when everybody stops being scared. That's what Mama used to say. Marcus stared at his daughter. When did your mother say that? Before she got sick. She was talking to Grandma on the phone. Grandma was scared about something, and Mama said the time is right when everybody stops being scared. She said fear is just love that doesn't know where to go. Victoria reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. Fear is just love that doesn't know where to go, she repeated softly. That's beautiful. Marcus felt something break open inside him. Something that had been closed for 4 years, locked away in a place he'd been afraid to visit. Jasmine always saw things that way. She could take the hardest truth and find the grace in it. She sounds incredible. She was. Marcus looked at Maya, then at Victoria. But she also told me that when she was gone, I shouldn't spend my life looking backward. She made me promise to keep moving forward, to keep loving, to keep letting people in. And have you kept that promise? Marcus thought about the past 6 months. The healing, the growth, the slow, terrifying process of opening his heart again. I'm trying, he said. I'm trying. Victoria squeezed his hand. That's enough. That's always enough. Maya had finished her ice cream and was watching them with a satisfied expression, like a chess player who'd just won a very long game. See, she said. That wasn't so hard. Marcus laughed. Victoria laughed. And for one perfect moment, in a small ice cream shop on an ordinary afternoon, the future felt not just possible, but bright. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the lobby of Prestige Medical Center and barely recognized it. Not because anything physical had changed. The marble floors still gleamed. The elevators still hummed. The reception desk still buzzed with activity. But something in the air felt different. Lighter. More human. He'd come back to work 3 months after the trial not because he needed the paycheck, but because the hospital needed him. Victoria had offered him a new title, Chief of Safety and Community Integration. A position that didn't exist before. A position she'd created specifically for him. You don't just fix buildings, she'd said when she offered it. You fix the spaces between people. That's what this hospital needs more than anything. He'd accepted. Not for the title or the salary, but because the work mattered. Because every day he got to walk those halls and make sure that the people who kept the hospital running were seen, valued, protected. Today was different, though. Today wasn't about work. Today was about family. Maya burst through the front doors, her dress swirling around her knees, her braids bouncing as she ran. She was 10 now, taller than she'd been a year ago, but still carrying that same fierce intensity that reminded Marcus so much of Jasmine. Daddy, they're almost ready. Marcus smiled and caught her in his arms. Slow down, baby girl. We've got time. But Victoria said the ceremony starts in 20 minutes and you're not even dressed yet. He looked down at his work clothes. She had a point. All right. Let me go change. You go find Victoria and tell her I'll be there. Maya was already running toward the elevator before he finished speaking. In his office, Marcus changed into the suit Victoria had bought him for the occasion. Charcoal gray with a subtle pattern. Expensive in a way he still wasn't used to. But Victoria had insisted, and he'd learned over the past year, that arguing with her about certain things was pointless. He looked at himself in the small mirror on the back of his door. The man staring back at him was the same man who'd pushed a mop through these halls for 11 years. The same man who'd carried his sleeping daughter through parking garages after midnight shifts. The same man who'd held his dying wife's hand and promised to keep going no matter what. But he was also different, calmer, more at peace, like something that had been clenched inside him for years had finally started to relax. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus, you ready? He opened the door. Victoria stood in the hallway wearing a deep blue dress that made her look like someone from a world he'd never imagined entering. But her smile was the same one she'd given him in the ice cream shop in the hospital room, in all the quiet moments they'd shared over the past year. "You clean up nice," she said. "You're not so bad yourself." She took his arm, and they walked toward the elevator together. Through the corridors they'd both bled to protect. Past the basement entrance where he'd almost died. Past the executive lounge where everything had started. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little. You terrified?" She laughed softly. "I've given speeches to investors, board members, senators. But this feels different. Because it's personal. Because it matters." The auditorium was packed when they arrived. Hospital staff filled every seat from surgeons in scrubs to cafeteria workers in aprons. Maintenance crews, nurses, orderlies, administrative assistants, the visible and the invisible all gathered together. At the front of the room, a small stage had been set up with a podium and a display board covered in photographs. Marcus recognized most of the faces. People he'd worked alongside for years. People who'd never received recognition for the work they did. Today, that was going to change. Maya was already in the front row saving seats. She waved frantically when she saw them approaching. "Over here, I saved the best spots." They sat down on either side of her, a configuration that had become natural over the past year. Marcus on her left, Victoria on her right. A family that had found each other in the wreckage of a crisis nobody had asked for. Dr. Harmon took the stage and tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for being here today. 1 year ago, this hospital faced a crisis that could have destroyed us. People got sick, lives were endangered, and the truth came very close to being buried forever." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the audience. "But we're not here to talk about the crisis. We're here to talk about the people who saw us through it. The people who work every day to keep this hospital running, even when no one notices. The people who clean our floors, maintain our equipment, prepare our food, and make sure that when you walk through these doors, you're walking into a place that cares." He gestured toward the display board. "Today, we're launching the Invisible Heroes Initiative, a program dedicated to recognizing and supporting the essential workers who are the true backbone of Prestige Medical Center. And there's no one more qualified to tell you about it than the man who inspired it." Dr. Harmon turned toward Marcus. "Marcus Johnson, would you please come up here?" Maya squeezed his hand. Victoria leaned over and whispered, "You've got this." Marcus walked to the stage, feeling every eye in the room on him. A year ago, that attention would have made him uncomfortable, would have felt wrong somehow, like he was stepping out of the shadows he'd learned to call home. But he wasn't that man anymore. He reached the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Saw Terry from maintenance, who'd been his friend for a decade. Saw the cafeteria workers who always saved him extra coffee on the late shifts. Saw the security guards who'd once escorted him out of the building on Victoria's orders. "I'm not very good at speeches," he began. "I spent most of my life trying not to be noticed, trying to do my job without making waves, trying to stay invisible." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "But I've learned something over the past year. Something that maybe I should have understood a long time ago. Being invisible isn't the same as being unimportant. The work you do in the shadows, the work nobody sees, that's the work that holds everything together." He looked at Victoria, at Maya, at the photograph of Jasmine that he carried in his pocket, creased and worn from years of touching. "My wife used to say that a building is like a person. It breathes, it feels, it needs someone to take care of its heart. For 11 years, I tried to be that person for this hospital. I fixed pipes and cleaned floors and made sure the lights stayed on. And I thought that was enough." His voice caught slightly. "But then, something happened. Something that forced me to stop hiding. Forced me to speak up, even when speaking up cost me everything. And what I discovered was that the people I thought didn't see me, they saw me all along. They were just waiting for me to see myself." He stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. This initiative isn't about me. It's about every person in this room who has ever felt invisible. Every janitor who's been looked past. Every cafeteria worker who's been ignored. Every maintenance tech who's been treated like they don't matter. You matter. Your work matters. And from now on, this hospital is going to make sure you know it. The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. People rose from their seats, cheered, clapped until their hands hurt. Maya was crying. Victoria was crying. Even Dr. Harmon, standing at the side of the stage, was wiping his eyes. Marcus stood in the spotlight, absorbing the recognition he'd never asked for, understanding for the first time that accepting it wasn't about ego. It was about showing everyone else in the room that their work mattered too. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Food and drinks and conversations that flowed easily between people who had once been separated by invisible walls. Marcus moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, deflecting praise toward the people who deserved it. He found Terry near the punch bowl, looking uncomfortable in a tie that didn't quite fit. "Some speech," Terry said. "Didn't know you had it in you." "Neither did I." "You really think this initiative is going to change anything?" Marcus looked around the room. At surgeons talking to orderlies. At executives laughing with cafeteria workers. At walls coming down that had stood for decades. "I think it already has." Terry nodded slowly. "You know, when you first got fired, I thought you were done. Thought the system had finally chewed you up and spit you out like it does everyone else. Almost did. But you came back, fought harder than anyone I've ever seen, and now look at you." Terry shook his head. "Standing on stages, giving speeches, changing the whole damn culture of this place. I had help. You had heart. That's different." Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. Victoria had appeared beside him, Maya in tow. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone who wants to talk to you." She gestured toward a woman standing alone by the window. Older, thin, wearing a simple dress that had seen better days. Marcus didn't recognize her. "Who is she?" "Her name is Ruth. Her husband was one of the patients who got sick during the contamination. He almost died." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What does she want?" "She wants to thank you." He walked over slowly, not sure what to expect. Ruth turned when she heard him approach, and her eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Johnson." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Ruth Patterson. My husband George was in the ICU when the ventilation system failed." "I remember. He was one of the first to show symptoms." Ruth nodded, her hands trembling. "The doctor said he might not make it. Said the infection was too advanced. I spent 3 weeks in that hospital praying every day, not knowing if he was going to wake up." "I'm sorry you had to go through that." "But he did wake up. He came home. We celebrated our 40th anniversary last month." She reached out and took Marcus's hand. "Because of you. Because you saw what was happening when nobody else did. Because you fought when everybody else looked away." Marcus didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to carry the weight of gratitude this profound. "I was just doing my job, ma'am." "No." Ruth shook her head firmly. "You were doing God's work. There's a difference." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "George wanted you to have this. He wrote it himself, even though his hands still shake from the treatment." Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in shaky handwriting. "Mr. Johnson, I don't know how to thank a man for saving my life. I don't know the right words or the right gestures. All I know is that because of you, I got to see my granddaughter take her first steps. I got to hold my wife's hand on our anniversary. I got to watch one more sunrise and one more after that. You probably think you're just a janitor. But to me, you're a guardian angel who happened to carry a mop instead of wings. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. George Patterson." Marcus read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket next to the photograph of Jasmine. "Tell George that I'm honored," he said, his voice rough. "And tell him I'm glad he's still here." Ruth squeezed his hand one more time, then walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Victoria appeared at his side. "You okay?" "Yeah." He took a breath. "Yeah, I think I am." The reception went on for another hour. More conversations. More connections. More moments that reminded Marcus why he'd come back to this place instead of walking away. When it was finally over, he found Maya asleep in one of the chairs, her head resting on Victoria's shoulder. Victoria looked up when he approached, her expression soft. She fought it as long as she could. Said she wanted to stay until the very end. "That's my girl." Marcus lifted Maya, carefully cradling her against his chest, the way he had when she was a baby. She stirred slightly, mumbled something about ice cream, then settled back into sleep. They walked out of the hospital together into the cool evening air. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the sun setting behind the city skyline. "I want to show you something," Victoria said, "before we go home." She led them to a small garden at the side of the hospital. It was new, planted just a few months ago. Benches surrounded a central fountain, and flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds. "What is this?" "It's a memorial garden. For the patients who were affected by the contamination." Victoria pointed to a plaque on a stone near the fountain. "Read it." Marcus shifted Maya's weight and leaned closer to read the inscription. "This garden is dedicated to the memory of those we lost and to the courage of those who fought to save them. May it remind us that the true measure of a place is how it treats the people others don't see. In honor of Marcus Johnson, who taught us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they carry mops." Marcus stared at the words, read them again, felt something break open inside him that he hadn't even known was still closed. "Victoria, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to see it, to know that what you did matters, that it's going to keep mattering long after both of us are gone." He turned to her, this woman who had started as his enemy and become something he still didn't have words for. This woman who had seen him at his worst and helped him become his best. "Thank you," he said simply, "for all of it." "Thank you," she replied, "for not giving up on me when I gave you every reason to." They stood together in the garden, the fountain bubbling softly behind them, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. Their daughter. That's how Marcus had started to think of Maya when Victoria was around. Not just his daughter, theirs. It had happened gradually over months of dinners and conversations and quiet moments. Victoria showing up for Maya's school events, Victoria helping with homework, Victoria learning to braid Maya's hair the way Jasmine used to, practicing until her fingers ached. And Maya, wise beyond her years, had welcomed it all without hesitation. "She needs a mom," Maya had told him one night. "Not to replace Mama. Nobody could do that. But to help. The way you need help sometimes, even when you don't want to admit it." Marcus had asked her how she'd gotten so smart. "I learned from watching you," she'd said. "You help people even when they don't ask for it. That's what love looks like." Now, standing in the memorial garden with Victoria beside him and Maya in his arms, Marcus understood what his daughter had meant. Love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It was about showing up, day after day, through the hard times and the easy ones, through the crises and the quiet moments. It was about being there for each other, even when being there cost you everything. Victoria took his hand. "Let's go home." Home. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. For years, home had been a small apartment with creaking floors and leaky faucets. A place Marcus had shared with Jasmine until she was gone, then with Maya alone. But over the past year, home had expanded, had grown to include a woman with sharp edges and a soft heart. A woman who had thrown a mop at him once, and now couldn't imagine her life without him. They'd moved in together 3 months ago. A house in a quiet neighborhood. Not fancy, but warm. Full of Maya's drawings and Victoria's books and Marcus's tools. full of memories being made and wounds being healed. They drove there now, Maya still asleep in the back seat, the city lights fading behind them. "She did good today," Victoria said softly, sitting through that whole ceremony without complaining. She wanted to be there, said it was important. It was important, for all of us. Marcus glanced at her in the darkness. "Can I ask you something? Anything? When you first met me in the executive lounge, what did you see?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I saw a threat. Someone who didn't fit the narrative I'd built for myself. Someone who challenged everything I thought I knew about how the world worked. And now..." She reached over and touched his arm. "Now I see the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. The man who taught me that strength isn't about power or position. It's about showing up for the people who need you, even when it costs you everything." That's a lot to put on a janitor. "You're not a janitor anymore." "I know, but that's not the point." He paused, finding the words. "The point is that who I was matters as much as who I've become. The man who mopped floors for 11 years is the same man sitting here now. I didn't change. I just finally let myself be seen." Victoria nodded slowly. "And you helped me see too. See the people I'd been looking past my whole career. See the value in work that doesn't come with corner offices and expense accounts. We helped each other." "We did." They pulled into the driveway. The house was dark, waiting for them to bring it to life. Marcus carried Maya inside and tucked her into bed. She woke briefly as he pulled the covers up to her chin. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby." "Is Victoria staying forever?" He smiled. "I hope so." "Good." She yawned. "Because I already told God to add her to our family. And God said okay." Marcus kissed her forehead. "When did you talk to God?" "Tonight. In my head, while everyone was clapping for you." She closed her eyes. "He said Mama is happy. She's glad you found someone to help take care of us." Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, unable to speak, unable to move. "Mama also said to tell you something," Maya murmured, already half asleep. "What did she say?" "She said, you kept your promise. Now it's okay to keep living." The words hit Marcus like a wave. He gripped the edge of the bed, tears streaming down his face, feeling something that had been lodged in his chest for 4 years finally break free. He sat there for a long time, watching his daughter sleep, thinking about the woman he'd lost, and the woman he'd found, and the journey that had connected them all. When he finally walked back to the living room, Victoria was waiting for him. She saw his tears and opened her arms, pulling him close. "What happened?" Maya said something about Jasmine. Victoria held him tighter. She didn't ask what it was, didn't need to. Just held him while he cried, while he grieved, while he finally let go of the guilt he'd been carrying since the day his wife died. "I loved her so much," he whispered. "I still love her." "I know. But I love you too. And for a long time I thought I couldn't do both. Thought loving someone new meant betraying what I had before." Victoria pulled back and looked at him. "The heart doesn't work that way, Marcus. Love isn't a finite resource. It grows, it expands, it makes room for new people without pushing out the old ones." "Maya said Jasmine is happy, that she's glad I found you. Do you believe that?" Marcus thought about it, really thought about it, about Jasmine's laugh and Jasmine's wisdom and Jasmine's absolute insistence that he never give up on life no matter what happened. "Yeah," he said finally. "I believe it." Victoria kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. "Then let's honor her memory by living the best life we can, together." 6 months later, they got married. The ceremony was small. Just family and close friends gathered in the Memorial Garden at Prestige Medical Center. Dr. Harmon officiated. Terry served as best man. Maya, now 11, walked down the aisle carrying flowers and a photograph of Jasmine. "Mama should be here too," she'd insisted. She's still part of our family." Nobody argued. Marcus stood at the altar in his charcoal suit, watching Victoria walk toward him in a simple white dress. She'd refused anything elaborate. Said she didn't need fancy when she had real. Their vows were simple. "I promise to see you," Victoria said. "Every day, in every way, to never let you become invisible again." "I promise to protect you," Marcus replied. "Not just from danger, but from the loneliness that comes from carrying everything alone. We carry it together now, always." When they kissed, the small crowd cheered. Maya cheered loudest of all. Afterward, there was cake and champagne and dancing in the garden. Marcus found himself standing near the memorial plaque, reading the words again, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Dr. Harmon appeared beside him. "Hell of a journey, Marcus." "That's one way to put it." "You know, when I first called you after you got fired, I wasn't sure you'd answer. I figured you'd be too angry, too hurt. I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd told me to go to hell." "I thought about it." "But you didn't. You came back. You fought. You risked everything to do what was right." Dr. Harmon shook his head. "I've worked in medicine for 30 years. I've seen a lot of people claim to be heroes, but I've never seen anyone who actually deserved the title until I met you. I'm not a hero. You are to a lot of people. To Ruth Patterson and her husband. To the 11 patients who survived because of what you did. To Victoria. To Maya." Dr. Harmon paused. "To me." Marcus didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to carry that kind of weight. "I just did what needed to be done." That's what heroes say, every single time. Victoria appeared at Marcus's side, slipping her hand into his. "Stealing my husband already, Harold. Just reminding him how lucky we all are that he exists. I remind him every day." She leaned into Marcus. "He doesn't always believe me." "I'm working on it," Marcus said. Dr. Harmon excused himself, leaving them alone by the memorial. "Dance with me," Victoria asked. "There's no music. There doesn't have to be." They swayed together in the garden, surrounded by flowers and memory and the soft sound of their daughter laughing somewhere nearby. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," Marcus said. "That this is all going to disappear and I'll be back in that basement with zip ties around my wrists. This is real, all of it, and it's not going anywhere." "How can you be sure?" Victoria pulled back and looked at him. "Because I know who you are now. I know what you're willing to do for the people you love. And I know that nothing is ever going to make me let you go." Marcus kissed her, long and deep and full of everything he couldn't say with words. When they finally broke apart, Maya had appeared beside them. "Are you done being mushy because there's cake, and I'm not allowed to have any until you cut it?" They laughed, walked back to the reception together, cut the cake and fed each other bites while everyone cheered. And later, when the guests had gone and the garden was quiet, the three of them stood together at the fountain, watching the water catch the light of the setting sun. "Daddy," Maya said. "Yeah, baby. Remember what Mama used to say about how some people fix cars and some people fix computers, but you fix everything nobody else knows how to fix?" "I remember." I think she was right, but I think there's one more thing you fix that she didn't know about. "What's that?" Maya looked at him with those wise, ancient eyes. "Hearts. You fix broken hearts. You fixed mine after Mama died. You fixed Victoria's after she forgot how to feel. And I think—" She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I think you finally fixed your own." Marcus pulled his daughter close, pulled his wife close, held them both as the sun went down and the first stars appeared overhead. "Your mama would be so proud of you," he whispered. "So proud of who you're becoming." "She'd be proud of you too, Daddy, for keeping your promise, for not giving up, for finding us a family again." Victoria wiped tears from her eyes. "I don't know how I got so lucky, to find both of you." "You weren't lucky," Marcus said. "You were brave. Brave enough to change. Brave enough to see what was right in front of you. Brave enough to let love in, even when it scared you." "We're all brave," Maya said matter-of-factly. "That's why we found each other. Because brave people always find their way home." They stood there until the stars filled the sky. Three people who had been broken and lost and alone finally made whole by the simple act of choosing each other. The next morning, Marcus woke before dawn. He slipped out of bed, quietly careful not to wake Victoria, and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. On the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a hospital, was Maya's latest drawing. Three figures standing under a rainbow holding hands. Underneath, in her careful handwriting, were the words, "My family, the invisible hero, the lady who learned to see, and me." Marcus touched the drawing, felt the texture of the crayon beneath his fingers, remembered all the nights he'd spent alone in this kitchen, wondering if he'd ever feel whole again. He was whole now. Not because the wounds had disappeared, but because he'd finally learned that scars could be beautiful, that broken things could be mended, that love, real love, didn't require perfection. It just required showing up, day after day, through the storms and the sunshine, through the crises and the quiet moments. It required being there. Victoria appeared in the doorway, sleepy and beautiful, and so present it made his chest ache. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." "Bad dreams." "Good ones, actually. So good I wanted to wake up and make sure they were real." She crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him. "They're real. All of it." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "I'm finally starting to believe it." Outside, the sun was rising. Another day was beginning. Another chance to love, to protect, to be seen. Marcus Johnson had spent 11 years as an invisible man. 11 years pushing mops and fixing pipes and keeping buildings alive while the world looked past him like he didn't exist. But he wasn't invisible anymore. He was a husband, a father, a hero to people who would never forget what he'd done. And more importantly, he was finally at peace with the man he'd always been. The man who showed up. The man who fought for what was right. The man who kept his promises no matter what they cost. Jasmine had asked him to take care of their baby. He'd done that. She'd asked him to keep living. He'd done that too. And now, standing in his kitchen with his wife in his arms and his daughter's drawing on the refrigerator, he understood something he'd been too scared to admit for years. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was home. The coffee finished brewing. Victoria poured 2 cups. They sat at the kitchen table together, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold. Maya appeared a few minutes later, yawning and rumpled her braids coming undone. "Morning," she mumbled, climbing into Marcus's lap. "Why is everyone up so early?" "Because today is special," Victoria said. "Why?" "Because we're together, and we're happy, and that's always worth celebrating." Maya considered this with her usual seriousness. Then she nodded. "Okay, can we celebrate with pancakes?" Marcus laughed. Victoria laughed. And for one perfect morning in a small house in a quiet neighborhood, a family sat together and remembered what it meant to be whole. Some heroes wear capes, some wear uniforms, some carry badges and guns and the weight of public expectation. But the greatest heroes are the ones nobody sees. The ones who show up in the darkness and fix what's broken without asking for recognition. The ones who carry other people's burdens because they know what it's like to carry their own. Marcus Johnson was one of those heroes. He always had been. And now, finally, the world could see it too.